Video games are a great way to explore a story, but no matter how good they are, they'll always have their limits. Regardless of how many side quests they try to pack in, there will always be character stories or lore that won't get much screen time and questions that will be left unanswered. If you do want to explore further though, there are a good many titles that have been turned into either a TV show or movies with mixed results. But that's not all, as there are also plenty that have been adapted to a printed format. So we brought together some of the best novels based on video games out there according to general public consensus, as well as proper reviews as and when we could find them. To be clear, we are specifically talking about novels here. There are plenty of novellas, manga, and graphic novel adaptations as well, but there are more than enough of those to fill their own lists. We've also gone with only one book per franchise, mainly so that this thing isn't completely dominated by Halo novelizations. With all of that out of the way, I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 best novels based on video games. Number 10. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. The Assassin's Creed series is a big one, and as it can be set anywhere, it's no surprise that there are more novels that relate to the stab-happy Secret Order than there are mainline games. These range from stories that either follow or are closely related to a specific game, some based off the slightly more obscure spin-offs, and even some completely original stories. Of all of the games thus far though, the ones that tend to be considered the most well-loved are those that follow the various escapades of Ezio Auditore di Firenze throughout the years of his long and illustrious career. As they're so popular, it's unsurprising they've had adaptations devoted to them, and one of the best of all is Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. The novelization unsurprisingly follows the events of the game of the same name quite closely, but adds an extra layer to things with more details and scenes, as well as all the added benefits of getting to learn exactly what Ezio's thoughts are about the various situations he finds himself in. The biggest disadvantage is that it requires a bit of knowledge of the more mystical elements of the story, but honestly, Ubisoft lost the plot with that stuff themselves anyway, so it may not be as big of a barrier for entry as it seems. Number 9. Day Zero, a Watch Dogs Legion novel. The world of Watch Dogs is full of hacking, drama, and intrigue, which makes it a perfect fit for a thriller novel adaptation. While Watch Dogs Legion is not necessarily the most popular of the series, it has a fairly decent prequel accompaniment, Day Zero. The book takes place a year before the game and focuses on 4 different folks who all find themselves embroiled in a huge conspiracy to bring chaos and disorder to London despite being from very different backgrounds. There's new DedSec recruit Ollie Soames, who quickly learns firsthand what dangers the group can bring, politician Sarah Lincoln, who uses the murders that are occurring in her district as leverage for her career, ex-MMA fighter Ro Hayes, who is now involved in an underground crime ring, and Danny, a private military contractor who has to do questionable things. By the end of their interconnected stories, readers will know more about what happens at the start of the game. Despite the changing perspectives, the book isn't too confusing and is overall a pretty decent and exciting read, though with so many characters, they don't all get fleshed out as much as they should. Still, for anyone who's a fan of the Watch Dogs universe, it's a good read and a fun introduction to the most recent title. Number 8. Darksiders: The Abomination Vault. The Darksiders series has been dormant for a little while now, but the good news for fans is that you don't have to wait for the next game to get your fix, because Darksiders: The Abomination Vault is a good little bit of lore for those who like reading. Set eons before the events of Darksiders 1 and 2, the Abomination Vault primarily follows death as well as war as they investigate an attack led by a mysterious foe who is looking for the eponymous vault, a huge stockpile of powerful weapons powered by hatred which could easily decimate the forces of heaven, hell, and anywhere in between. This wholly separate tale of the Horsemen's adventures helps to explain their relationships as well as a bit of their background and history. Best of all, the book doesn't require readers to know anything about the games. Yes, there are things that fans are more likely to pick up on, but overall it reads like a fantasy novel with only the drawn-out battle sequences bogging things down. However, if you're looking for a fun game-related fantasy read, especially if you're already a fan of the series, there are worse places to start. Number 7. City of the Dead. Resident Evil as a game series has had its ups and downs, and the franchise has had a fair few adaptations over the years, primarily in the form of movies, which are generally rubbish. The books, however, tend to be much better received, and perhaps one of the best of the options out there is City of the Dead. This novelization is based on Resident Evil 2 and as such follows series mainstays Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield as they enter and explore Raccoon City and become acutely aware of the horrible events that have occurred there. Similar to other direct game-to-novel adaptations such as the Assassin's Creed one we looked at earlier, the book allows for characters who only get brief intros in the game to come into their own and have more of a spotlight on their own personal hopes and fears than could have been conveyed with the cutscenes of the game. It's also a relatively quick read, especially for those who are familiar with the game and the various exploits of Umbrella. The only thing that gets lost in translation a bit is the spook factor, but that may actually be a positive thing for some. Number 6. Life is Strange – Steph's Story. There are so many characters in the Life is Strange games that almost all of them could warrant a book all on their own, and this would allow players to explore them, their lives, and their motivations in an even more in-depth way than the already heavily emotional character-driven narratives do. One of the fan-favorite characters, though, is Steph Gingrich, who first showed up in Life is Strange Before the Storm and eventually became a major character and potential love interest when True Colors rolled around, so it's unsurprising that Steph's story is one that many fans are the most interested in. This novel fills in the gaps between the two games she appears in and explains exactly how she ended up in Haven Springs, Colorado. After going back to Seattle to stay with her dad and figure her life out, she meets a girl named Izzy who she soon becomes enamored with and ends up joining her band, which sends her on a whirlwind tour across the United States. Though the tone of Life is Strange is not necessarily for everyone, those who are fans of the games are sure to love this insight into the shenanigans of a beloved character. Number 5. Arthas: Rise of the Lich King. World of Warcraft has had so many stories, expansions, and add-ons throughout the years, but fans still can't get enough of it. As such, there are plenty of novels that do what they can to expand the lore and give players more of what they want, including Arthas: Rise of the Lich King. As the title would suggest, it focuses on the eponymous Lich King before and after he becomes evil, starting when he is instead the Crown Prince of Lordaeron, Arthas Menethil. After a plague threatens everything that he holds most dear, he sets off to find a blade that's powerful enough to help him save his land. Unfortunately, the blade he ends up finding is Frostmourne, which eventually corrupts him and turns him into the darkest version of himself. Whoops. Again, building upon lore that the game doesn't necessarily explain, this is a good way to explore how exactly Arthas was changed and morphed into one of the most evil characters in the Warcraft universe. Some find that the switch to evil came too quickly, and that the parts prior to his corruption were more interesting than those after, but anyone who wants more lore from the Warcraft world is sure to get their fill here. Number 4. BioShock Rapture. When you take into account how popular BioShock is, being considered one of the best games of all time, it's quite surprising that there is so little out there that allows players to dive more into its lore. However, there is one great option for those who do want to explore more: BioShock Rapture. Once again, this one is a prequel and follows a whole multitude of characters, some of whom will be recognizable to those who have played the games, and some of whom are completely new but provide their own context and perspectives on the rise and fall of Rapture and the many issues and advantages that supposedly utopian free market city came along with. A fantastic companion novel, Rapture explains much more about the underground city than the games could ever hope to do fully on their own merits, explaining how the splices came to be, giving more backstory to multiple characters that even the audio diaries could never hope to do, and fully fleshing out Andrew Ryan, Frank Fontaine, and their various motivations that are only just touched upon in the games. The main disadvantage this novel has is that with how brilliant the first BioShock game is, it's hard to measure up to, and some may find that they're disappointed with how the atmospheric world has been adapted. However, if you want to learn more about the turbulent history of the underwater city, there are few other ways to do so. Number 3. Tevinter Nights. Tevinter Nights, the 6th in a series of Dragon Age-related novels, is a bit of an exception to our rule, being as it is an anthology of original stories based on the popular BioWare fantasy RPG series, as opposed to its own bespoke story. However, with its 15 different offerings and a cast of both new and returning characters, there's almost certain to be something to appeal to every fan of the series. Though they are separate stories, a vast majority of them focus on the northern reaches of Thedas, throw in special references and potential information about the future of the series, and help draw people back into the world that they love so much. Despite the variety of different characters that can be found in the book, a lot of the stories can seem a bit repetitive, and some found that they weren't concluded in a very satisfactory way, likely setting up things which will be explained in full in later entries of the series. Also, since they are short stories unto themselves, they are sometimes a bit rushed. However, considering the next game isn't due for a while yet, this is a great way to get your Dragon Age fix for the time being. Number 2. Gears of War: The Slab. Though there are several games in the Gears of War series, there are still many stories from the universe that haven't been told in video game form, and the next novel is one of them. Gears of War: The Slab focuses on the story of Marcus Phoenix's court-martial and incarceration as he abandons his post in order to rescue his father, but ends up contributing to the fall of Ephyra as a result. Normally, such a thing would mean a death sentence. However, thanks to some mysterious interference, he ends up going to the notorious prison, the eponymous Slab, instead, and while he's there, he learns exactly why he was spared and who did it. At the same time, Dom and Anya, his fellow Gears, are trying to do what they can from the outside to get him released as well. The over-militaristic nature of the novel may not appeal to everyone, but let's be honest, what did you expect from a Gears of War title? Sunshines and rainbows? Hardly. Here's some grey and brown and lots of scowling. Fortunately though, if you are into this kind of thing and Gears of War in general, you'll find a great military thriller with loads of gunfights in these pages. Number 1. Halo Renegades. From one massive Xbox series to another now, as we finally turn our attention to Halo and one of the more than 30 related novels that have been published over the years. The great thing about these is that almost every one of them is considered to be pretty decent, and by our extremely scientific calculations, even the worst of them will still at least be entertaining enough. However, by those same calculations, the best one of the lot is Halo Renegades. The second of the so-called Ace of Spades trilogy of titles, Renegades follows Ryan Forge and her crew as she hopes to find her father, or at least learn his fate, all while dodging both Oni and various remnants of the Covenant thanks to her stumbling across a Forerunner debris field. Unsurprisingly, this throws them all for a bit of a loop, and sends them on a much more dangerous adventure than they initially anticipated. Weaving elements of the previous book and the overall Halo lore together masterfully, Renegades is a great, fast read that fans are sure to enjoy. The main disadvantage is that it's the middle book of a series, but it manages to stand on its own well enough that should you choose to start your journey with this one, you'll still have a good time.